Well, hello. Before we get started, I'd like to share with you a shocking statistic. 60% of presentations made to senior decision makers fail. Yes, that's right. 60. So let's think about that for a moment, because the impact is huge. Not only is there a massive cost of executive time, but also ideas that may have propelled the business forward just lie dying on the floor because the value of the idea just wasn't made clear. In 2003, PowerSpeaking launched Speaking Up, presenting to decision makers, a groundbreaking program designed to fill a critical gap in corporate training. Really central to our research in developing the program was scores of in-person interviews with senior decision makers who outlined what does and what doesn't work when presenting to and communicating with them. We've always shared video snippets of our interviews in our training program. And in fact, when I joined the company back in 2014 as a coach and facilitator, one of the videos showed an executive explaining how difficult it was for presenters to hold an executive's attention because they were being easily distracted by, you guessed it, their Blackberries. For those of you too young to remember, he wasn't referring to his fruit salad, but to his smartphone. So fast forward to today, and I'm excited to learn how things have or haven't changed. My name is Sarah Palmer, and I am the Director of Business Development in EMEA, as well as the coach and facilitator. And I'd like to invite you to participate in today's conversation. We'd like to tap into what you know. So chat is already wide open with space for you to share your own experience and advice on what you find works or maybe what doesn't work when you're presenting to your senior decision makers. It's now my pleasure and my privilege to introduce you to Carrie Beckstrom, the CEO of PowerSpeaking, who's going to be giving us a sneak preview of the latest round of interviews that she's just completed with senior executives around the globe. She'll be sharing her deep experience and insights into cracking the code of executive presentations today. And I know she joins me in encouraging you to ask any questions on this topic in chat, and we'll do our very best to answer them. So, Carrie, welcome. I know you're launching a full research report in May, but spoiler alert, I have one question for you. Any mention of Blackberries?
There is not a mention of BlackBerry, Sarah. There's a lot of mention of the fact that more and more executives now have their computer right in front of them during a meeting, which makes the challenge even that more difficult. But no reference to BlackBerries.
No surprise there. So maybe you can start, Carrie, by just sharing what initially sparked the idea to revisit your research on executive communications after all these years.
Absolutely. Before I respond to that, Sarah, I just have to say how delightful it is to be a guest on my own show. It's just really fun to kind of reverse the table here. And thank you so much for hosting this great discussion. So the bottom line is that what was reinforced during the first round of interviews and once again during this most recent round of interviews is that getting this right is really, really tough. It necessitates developing a very sophisticated, complex set of skills, and it goes way beyond just being able to effectively deliver a presentation to decision makers, executives. There is so much involved, a lot that happens before you even step into that room, whether it be in person or virtual. So, for example, you have to be effective at navigating politics. You have to be skilled at achieving alignment with a group of strategic stakeholders. You have to be able to develop a solid business case and then translate that into a presentation and structure that's going to resonate with the executives. You have to be able to be artful at facilitating a dynamic, robust discussion. You have to spend time cultivating your own personal brand, and you have to be able to exhibit what we call powerful presence, which is often referred to as executive presence. So it's not surprising to me at all that more of these fail than succeed. As you mentioned, 60%, a staggering 60% fail. And think about the opportunity cost associated with that, not to mention the adverse impact that it can have on the speaker's brand and their ability to advance within an organization. It's high stakes.
Yeah, absolutely. Just such a huge amount to be juggling and thinking about when you're not only in the room, but obviously beforehand. So, have you got any insight into what's the top reason for failure? Because that's
Yeah, aside from it just being quite complex and therefore it takes a lot of focus, practice, time, experience, training, etc. But I'd say first and foremost, it's due to a failure on the speaker's part to understand the executive mindset. And understanding the executive mindset necessitates a shift in the speaker's mindset and a shift in how they would typically approach this type of situation. So it's radically different than the approach you would take with a peer-to-peer presentation, et cetera. So just to elaborate on that a little bit more, as we know, executives have enormous spans of control, meaning they know a lot about a variety of things, but don't necessarily have the ability or need or time to go deep. They're time pressured. So oftentimes that means they're impatient and which makes it extra important for you to be able to get to the point quickly. They are under immense pressure and responsibility, and their decisions, think about this, their decisions impact markets and organizations. So if your role is to try to help an executive achieve the right decision on behalf of the business, that's a high stakes situation that you're in. So now to elaborate a little bit more on what that means in terms of the speaker needing to shift their mindset and approach, something that came up even more, I think, in this round of interviews is this concept of first and foremost striving to be a value creator. It's not about you, and we talk about that in our workshops today. It's about you helping leaders to make the best decision on behalf of the business. So your goal is to be a value creator. Part of doing that successfully is completely shifting the way you would organize your talk or your presentation or your argument by leading with the bottom line, which is often counterintuitive. That's not how we're taught in school. We're taught to kind of lay things out chronologically and then kind of get to that ultimate recommendation or ask. Not effective when talking to executives. And additionally, you need to be prepared to facilitate a dynamic conversation versus having a one-way presentation.
Mm, I think I often come across this because I put a sales background, and I often come across this. Do we have to say the price up front? And you think, well, there's no point in hiding it. They're going to find out at the end, and if they're not interested because of the price, and it's really interesting how, as you said, at school and traditionally we're trained to build an argument and then go for the kill at the end, and this is not what's still not what's coming through in the interviews, the same as before.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I think what's exciting, extra exciting about this session is we're going to share just a few clips with you. And I think this is the time in which we're going to share the first one. This is from an executive, Gillian Fox, who is the founder and managing director of Your Brilliant Career. And she does a really nice job in this clip of describing what it means to be a value creator.
It's not about us. It's about the value that this is going to deliver to the business. And the thing I always like to think of, how is this going to add long-term value to the future of this business? Like if you can answer that with confidence, then your argument comes across as someone who is a value creator and is creating solutions that way.
Nice. I love it. You mentioned a little bit as well about audience centricity. And I know this is something we talk about a lot in our programs. We talk about really focusing on your audience. Who are they and how do they think? But I think can you elaborate what that means a little bit when you're talking about this level, when you're talking about senior decision makers, and what does audience centricity mean to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you pointed out, Sarah, a best practice associated with being an effective presentation, regardless of the audience, regardless of their goal, is always approaching it from an audience centric perspective versus a speaker centric perspective. When it comes to these types of high stake presentations, I would say the biggest difference is the depth of the analysis that needs to be done and resources that you need to tap into to do it effectively. So, one of the things that we have recommended for decades and still holds true today is the importance of securing a sponsor, someone who can be your advocate, someone who's ideally a peer of the other decision makers that you're going to be speaking to, and they can be a rich source for you as it relates to gathering that analysis. And examples of the type of information that you're trying to gather regarding the executives that you're going to be speaking to is what's top of mind for them? What are their priorities? And we'd like to believe that it's always aligned. Yes, there's overarching goals for the company, but often individual stakeholders have their own priorities, which can be competing, which just adds to the complexity of how you build your argument. The other thing is understanding their interpersonal communication style. How can you expect them to engage with you and show up during the main event? What idiosyncrasies or pet peeves should you be aware of? What are the power dynamics of the different individuals in the room? What are the team norms that you need to know? Those are just an example of the many things that you need to really understand that all influence the way that you prepare and structure your presentation. I'll just share two quick stories of times from my past, which go back several decades, but are still top of mind to me today because I neglected to do the level of analysis and had some real difficulty as a result. The first one relates to a group of executives I was presenting to for the very first time when I was really new in a leadership role. And therefore, I had very little interaction with them. In fact, prior to going into the room, I had only interacted with one of the executives who was going to be in the room. And one of the executives who actually, he was the general manager and he was kind of second in command from a power position to the president of the division. And shortly after I started talking, I noticed that he had this just incredibly distasteful look on his face, like he had just ate something nasty. He rarely made eye contact with me and looked down with that that expression almost the entire time I spoke. Needless to say, it was so disarming and had me in my head much more than I wanted to. Like, was it something distasteful that I said that's causing that reaction? So it rattled me. Now, even if I knew about this in advance, it still would have been somewhat intimidating. But it wouldn't have taken me off my game to the degree that I did. And what I found out is that was just his MO. It was nothing personal. He actually had a little bit of a bully tendency, and he did that tactic to try to get presenters off their game.
Yeah, that's very difficult though, because your head is telling you this is awful, he's not listening, he doesn't like it. And you have to stop that inner dialogue that's happening, don't you? So that you can move forward.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Do we have time for one more?
Yeah, go on. As many to show us, go on.
Okay. All right. One other example. Again, this goes back a few decades. I had the opportunity. I was working for a very large corporation that was headquartered in the United States, and one of the many divisions was in Prague. So I had the opportunity to present to the executive team in Prague for the first time in person. And I showed up. I felt really prepared, energized, ready to take this on. Walk into the room and I start distributing the printed deck. And all of the executives started looking at each other, kind of rolling their eyes. I seriously thought there was some sort of hidden joke that I wasn't aware of. Come to find out, they were much more forward thinking than we were in the US at that time in terms of sustainability, and they had gone completely digital. Having handouts was an absolute no-no,
Mm.
whereas in the US, it would be considered sloppy. And if you weren't prepared, if you didn't have those printed materials. So it can be, it's a lot of details that you really need to take into account, because the last thing that you want to do is start off with a misstep, because that can really jar your confidence.
Yeah. I think people underestimate the amount of pre-work that's needed in terms of your research before you even step into the room.
Exactly. And that's why I said earlier, getting this right is so much more than just delivering an effective presentation. A lot of it is what happens before you actually deliver.
Yeah. And are you happy to share a sneaky preview of one of the videos around this topic?
Love to. Let's go for it.
Prior to a meeting, I think it's really important that people presenting to executives understand what the executive likes. So everybody likes something different. If you've got multiple people in a meeting, I think it's important to chat with people who've met with these folks before and get a little bit of context on how they interact. So for example, I had a boss who knew every single number in a spreadsheet. So I knew prior to that meeting, I couldn't say, well, I'll get back to you, or I'm not really sure of the number. I needed to know my numbers because this person deeply cared about numbers and would know them. So I need to stay one step ahead. That's really good knowledge to have about a person before you go in and sell your idea to somebody. So I think getting a little bit of context on what each of the executives look for and how they engage in meeting can make that presenter much more successful.
Interesting. Don't assume they all want high level, because there may be somebody in the room who does want that detail. And if you're not ready with it. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think when we were talking earlier, we were talking a bit more about preparation and, exactly what else you need to do to prepare, particularly as regards questions and just going beyond just your subject matter.
Absolutely. So one of the things we already talked about, and that is highly recommend securing a sponsor who can serve as kind of your coach and advisor as you go through the whole preparation process. The other thing that, of course, takes an inordinate amount of time and never is done all alone, it's done in collaboration with a lot of other people, is building your business case. And as I mentioned earlier, then being able to translate that into a presentation that's structured in a way that's really going to resonate with the executives. The other thing I would say that you already mentioned, Sarah, is spending an ample amount of time anticipating the types of questions and objections that you may get, and to the degree possible, proactively incorporating that information into your presentation so they don't even need to ask. And then super, super important is rehearsing. And I'm talking about rehearsing out loud, rehearsing with your sponsor, rehearsing with peers, rehearsing while you're recording yourself and playing it back. That is absolutely paramount. And I have to share. Oh, and one thing I forgot to say, Sarah, of course, is developing any necessary supporting visuals. Notice that came near the very end. In your experience, Sarah, and you've been training on this forever, where do speakers often start when they find out that they're going to be delivering or they have the privilege, frankly, of delivering a presentation to executives?
It's nearly always with the slide deck. They look to see what they've got. They try and breathe some life into it, or they'll ask around who's got something on this. And then they try and make this slide deck make sense to the people they're presenting to. And, we've been teaching for years. We want to start the other way around and start by thinking about what you want to say before you look at that slide deck. But as you said as well, just anticipating the response people, not the response, but what that audience will need. And if you think they may want the detail, for sure, take that detail with you, but it shouldn't be the first thing that you present. So just having a backup deck or an appendix with the detail in case it comes up in questions is
Exactly.
really good policy, but don't start with the slide deck.
Exactly. Exactly. That comes near the very, very end. And not surprisingly, an overarching theme from the executives this round with regard to best practices in terms of your visuals, less is more. Emphasis on less is more. And to your point, if you suspect that you might need to have some supporting detail that is best shared with a graph or whatever, have that in your back pocket. Absolutely. You can have those and display them as needed. But as one executive told me, only double click if you're asked.
Yes.
Yeah.
It can go horribly wrong because it dilutes the point that you're making. Everyone gets sidetracked into the detail, and you end up going down a rabbit hole if you're not careful. So, yeah.
Yeah. Sarah, I'd love to share one more quote that describes this concept of preparation to me so well. She said, you need to prepare, 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 and then go with the flow, which almost sounds paradoxical, right? But the whole point is you want to know your talk track in and out so that you have the confidence and ability to flex in the moment, depending on what happens.
Yeah.
Having that ability to flex and, reading all of those cues is incredibly difficult to do if you don't have that talk track down pat in your mind, because you experience cognitive overload and you're just not able to act in a multifaceted way as effectively.
Absolutely. And you're not able to listen, because if you're just focused on your talk track and what you've rehearsed, then you're not listening and you're missing all those cues that say, this is the direction we want to go. And it's very frustrating for everybody. So yeah, I like that quote. I'm going to use that. Do you have any videos you might share around this topic?
We'll just be transparent with our audience. One of the things I said to Sarah at the outset is, please remind me if I fail to queue up a video. Since you're telling me, we must. Yes, let's hear from some of the executives on this topic of preparation.
Pre-work is how you show up as confident, how you come across as prepared and eloquent and thoughtful, and being able to address in your presentation the specific concerns of the audience that you're presenting to is so vital for buy-in and for how you're perceived within the organization.
How much time one spends in how you deliver your content is normally very, very little. Most of the time you're spending on putting the content together, all the outlines, your script, your slides, but how you deliver, normally you're winging it. And that's probably the most important part of it, because delivery is how people learn.
I love that reference to winging it. I mean, it's a prepared winging it. I don't want to give the impression that we should go around winging it, but I love that. It's that amount of preparedness that means that you can go with that flow. Lovely. We've talked a little bit about brevity and, keeping away from the detail and all the rest of it. But I know a lot of experts struggle with this. So did the executives share anything at all? Any practical tips on how to distill this often highly complex information into something that's meaningful so that they can make a decision on it?
Yes, and here I'm going to be tapping into the first round of research that we did, because really the advice still holds absolutely true to this day, and I want to acknowledge that this is hard. If you're a subject matter expert, your natural tendency is to want to go into a lot of specifics and a lot of details. So it takes practice and intention to learn to communicate in a different way. I'll just cover some guidelines that we cover today, and again, were reinforced through this most recent round of interviews that we did. One really helpful guideline is what we refer to as the 10 by 30 rule. So in other words, if you have a 30-minute time slot for your presentation, you want to prepare about 10 minutes of content. So you want content to represent a third of that time that you're going to be spending with the executive. Why? Because this isn't a presentation, it's a discussion as much as it is relaying and presenting information. So I think that general guideline is really, really helpful as it relates to knowing how much content you can even afford to bring into the discussion. The other thing is just going back to that executive mindset and really putting yourself in the shoes of the executive and asking yourself, what information must I relay to justify this recommendation or this ask and help the executives make the right decision? And what is that nice to have type stuff, the stuff that maybe you have in your back pocket in the event that you get a question. The other invaluable tool at your disposal are what we call frameworks. And we have frameworks for a lot of different things. Frameworks, whether you want to call it a blueprint, a formula, whatever, frameworks are incredibly useful in helping not only to structure the way in which you want to convey the information, but differentiate between the must-haves versus the nice-to-have. So we have a proven best practice executive framework that, by the way, was validated to be 100% accurate today as it was, again, when it was first developed. And we don't just have frameworks or formulas for the presentation itself. We have a recommended formula for how you respond to questions or objections that may come up in the moment. So practicing that is important. Having your elevator pitch in your back pocket in the event that you show up, you're prepared for a 30-minute discussion. The executives are running behind and they say, so sorry, but you got 10 minutes. What do you have? And then the other thing I would say is just really, really being conscious of your language choices and leaning focus on using very clear, concise language. And this, by the way, is emphasized even more today. As they say in smart brevity, it's becoming harder and harder and harder to punch through the noise because we are just constantly being inundated with information and distractions. So learning how to communicate concisely is even more important today than I think it was previously. AI, this is a great way in which AI can help. You may come up with your draft presentation, run it through AI and say, refine this so it's even clearer and more concise. But then modify it to make sure it's your own voice, it's your own. And then finally, the last thing I'd say, which we already talked about, is this is just another reason why practice is so important. If netting out your message doesn't come naturally to you, even more time you need to spend practicing.
Yeah. And I think somebody recommended to me once as well and said it doesn't matter if every time you say it, it's slightly different. In fact, that's a good thing. Don't learn it like a talk track because then you're talking at people and that doesn't sound natural, particularly if AI wrote it. But know what you want to say, the points you want to get across, practice saying it so it flows naturally, and then you will adapt your language in the moment. But be careful of those words that weaken your message.
Absolutely. And I'll just underscore, do not rely on your slide deck as your mechanism to help you be concise.
Mhm.
That means you often will fall into the trap of literally reading your slides. And not surprisingly, that was an over that came up time and time again in the discussions I had, is just being an absolute pet peeve and turn off to the executives immediately, not surprisingly.
Did there seem to be any consensus on how many slides they wanted? I know we often talked about no more than 3. Some companies will say. Some companies say do not bring a slide deck into the boardroom. Was there any magic number that came up at all, or was it just be concise?
There really wasn't, and I think this is why that audience analysis is so important, because it's really going to vary that expectation. I did speak to one new executive who has a hard, fast rule: no more than 5 slides ever, never. But that actually was kind of an exception. So again, I think it gets to the expectations of the team and the audience that you're going to be presenting to. However, as we talked about earlier, in general, less is more when it comes to visual aids.
Yeah. I think it's moving away from teaching them how to be subject matter expert because you're paid for that job, and it's distilling that information in a way they understand. Yeah. I think engagement is something that comes up a lot as well, is how do we engage? People often ask me, how do we engage with them? If you've got a lot of information to share and you haven't got much time, and yet we're told we're supposed to engage and interact with them, I'm pretty sure you've got a video you'd quite like to play at this point.
Remembering this time, Sarah. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. In this case, I'd love to, before responding, I'd love to lead with a few clips from some of the executives we spoke to. And by the way, I just want to say again to our audience, please, if you have specific questions or advice of your own that you'd like to share, I encourage you to put it in chat. We'd love to address any burning questions that might be on your mind or advice you want to insert into the conversation.
It is vitally important for people who get the privilege of presenting to executives to not just be well prepared to present, but also be well prepared to facilitate a discussion.
The people who are most confident and credible who present to me or engage with me are the people who make eye contact. They smile, they use their hands, they're energized, they have some life to them. That signals to me that they are engaged in the topic, they're interested in it, they're passionate about it, they have some personal buy-in to whatever the outcome might be.
You need to be multidimensional in that moment, not just someone who's capable of presenting a deck. You need to be interacting and facilitating and reading that room, so your message actually really lands.
I mean, how hard can it be, Carrie? You have to present and facilitate.
Exactly. Yeah. And as Marilyn said, mastering this skill of facilitation, navigating a complex conversation, whatever you want to call it, is vitally important. And I would say this is one of the most challenging skills to really do effectively. It takes practice, it takes coaching, it takes time, and it's a worthwhile investment. It's both an art and science.
Mhm.
I think that's part of what makes it really complex. And it's like this delicate dance of being able to deliver a confident message while reading the room, while taking in those cues and making decisions on the spot in terms of how you might want to flex, while allowing enough space for discussion and conversation while still being in the driver's seat. There's a lot of elements there. And by the way, you're doing this with people who are your superiors. So it takes extra confidence and courage, I think, to do it effectively. So just some of the tips I'll share are, and by the way, this is an example of something that is even more complex today. One point I made is because the level of the distractions and information overload that we're all experiencing in multiple channels, chat, Slack, blah, 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 just makes it even harder to command attention and effectively keep engagement and navigate that conversation. Additionally, if you're in a situation, which many of us are today, in which you have to do this virtually, it's even more challenging to effectively facilitate a conversation. So I'll share some tips, and then I think we're getting some comments in chat, which is terrific. The first thing I'll say is the importance of being 100% present. 100% present, which just goes back to the importance of making sure that you have that talk track down pat so that you can be in the moment and not in your head thinking about what it is you need to say next, or why is that general manager look like he just consumed something really nasty and maybe it was my words. The other point, and this is the concept that Gillian said about the importance of being multidimensional, is having a high degree of situational awareness and picking up as you're talking on all of those verbal and nonverbal cues, being really skilled at managing time and allowing that flexibility for that discussion or that sidebar, and then artfully bringing it back in a very respectful but commanding way. You mentioned this earlier, Sarah. You have to be an exceptional listener and be able to listen for the question behind the question and paraphrase when needed. And then finally, Jamie referenced this, having the ability to exhibit powerful presence. Again, we like to use the word powerful presence instead of executive presence because I think it's more inclusive and it's not just a skill that is reserved for executives. It's one we're all capable of exhibiting. And I'm just going to share really quickly a few ways in which different executives described what powerful presence means to them. One said a combination of warmth and authority. The other, calm confidence. Lastly, blend of confidence and humility. So it was expressed in different ways, but it really all came down to three things: confidence, competence, and authenticity.
Nice. Very nice. Not to remember when you're in the room, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes, because some of those techniques that you're talking about become easier because you know the people, you know what their questions are likely to be about, and it helps with that preparation. I don't want any folks here to feel put off by what we're talking about because it seems a lot to suddenly learn, but it does get easier with time.
Absolutely. Thank you for stressing that, Sarah. The goal here isn't to discourage people from even going here. That's not the objective at all. And I have to stress, it was so clear from every executive I spoke to, they want people to be successful. They need you. They need your great ideas. They need your recommendations. So this isn't about perfection. It's not about perfection. It's about making a genuine connection and influencing a positive outcome.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to have in your head as well when you step into the room, that they need my ideas. Whether they like them or not is another matter, but they need those ideas to come through. Well, we're getting a lot of stuff coming through at the moment. So shall we take some of the questions through?
Yeah.
So Jeff says, I love the reflection that when you find yourself describing the same topic or ask in different ways each time, this is a strength that you know your topic. So that's a nice reassurance. Mark's got a question. What's one piece of non-obvious or counterintuitive advice you could give people learning to present to executives?
Non-obvious.
It's hard. What's obvious to one person isn't necessarily obvious to another.
Yeah, so I'll share what comes to mind first and foremost. I was struck by the number of executives who have zero tolerance for speakers fiddling with the technology at the outset of their presentation and trying to get it right. It wasn't surprising that that was uh, annoying to them and have little tolerance. What the aha for me was that I think we can do more to set speakers up for success in providing very prescriptive advice on this front. So the first thing, and I this is a best practice no matter what, is don't lead with your slide deck. You want that opening to be all about you. They're there to see you. You are trying to make a genuine connection and a commanding presence at the outset. So don't have slides that you're dependent on in the very beginning in your opening where you're really setting the stage. The other benefit that provides is it buys you some time if there are technical difficulties at the outset. Secondly, regardless of whether it's a virtual meeting or in person, I think having a technical partner with you is essential, because I was thinking back to my corporate days, and many of the times in which I was presenting to the board, I was one of a number of consecutive presenters. So I didn't even have the opportunity to go into the meeting room and make sure my slide deck was up properly, that the audio worked. I had to do it in the moment. So my recommendation is you own the room, start the conversation while your technical partner is working with the technology. And I would say the same thing with a virtual presentation. So I don't know if that's non-obvious. It just it helped me to realize that there's more to it and more forethought.
Yeah. And I guess it gets even more complex if you're presenting in a hybrid situation as well, and how you prepare for all of that. And suddenly cameras on and there you are. And yeah, it's a very different feel from walking into a room or sitting in a room and then standing up when it's your turn to present.
Exactly. And as we recommend with hybrid, imperative that you've got a partner in, whether if you're presenting virtually, you've got a partner in the room who's sending you private messages or vice versa.
Yeah, you need your eyes and ears. One more question from Mary, and then I'll move back to one of mine. Executive presentations have changed drastically since the pandemic, i.e. so much more reliance on the virtual domain. What do the executives say about that shift to the virtual world rather than in person?
Oh, I'm so glad that came up, because that's definitely where we got some new insights and advice. So first of all, I'll say none of the executives love it. We're all in the same boat. We all have a preference for being in person. The reality is it's become the norm. So first, I'd love to share a quote from one of the executives, and then I'll give specifics in response to Mary's question. As this one executive said, the rhythm has to be different for a virtual presentation. It's incumbent upon presenters in virtual settings to bring a higher level of energy and content that's going to provoke discussion and thought. So 4 things. 1, higher energy. First of all, you heard Jamie say it. You want to be passionate about whatever topic it is you're presenting. You want to dial that up even more in virtual delivery, because maintaining that interest and engagement is more challenging, period. So you lean into voice inflection, fluctuation, the power of the pause. what we call pattern disruption. Don't have that damn deck up the whole time in your head in a little frame. When you get a question, take the deck down and just be focusing on the conversation in that virtual frame. The second is you have to be so much more intentional about where you want to incorporate interaction. So in virtual presentations, you want to periodically be calling upon executives, not to see if they're listening, but to say, Sarah, I know you have a lot of experience with regard to this market research. What are your thoughts on this topic? So think ahead about when you're going to call on executives and bring them into the conversation. And the third one is, we already talked about the importance of being concise, even more critical in a virtual environment.
And
I said four. The fourth is that partner that I mentioned.
yeah, I love it. On top of the difference between face-to-face and virtual, were there any other changes that came up? Because obviously we've been teaching this program for decades. Were there any other big changes that you noticed?
Yes. A few I'll emphasize. The first one, which I found really, really refreshing, is much more on an emphasis of the importance of the speaker exhibiting authenticity and transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And someone even asked in chat, how did I net out what powerful presence is? Confidence, competence, and authenticity. What that means is, gone are the days, thank goodness, in which executive presence correlates with a stereotypical persona. Powerful presence is exhibited in many, many different ways, and it has to be uniquely your own. And I think one of the reasons that this is so underscored today, in part, is because of our heightened focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Also, it is one of the fastest ways to establish a genuine connection and build trust. So I would say that's one. And I'll just share two quotes from executives I spoke to. Addie said, exuding confidence, being concise, and making sure the real me shows up. That's how she defined powerful presence. Natalie said, I think that the secret to confident communication is to really believe in what you're saying and to say it in a way that's a reflection of your true self.
Nice.
Which is why I mentioned earlier, part of doing this well is spending time in cultivating your own authentic brand and knowing how to make sure that shows up. The other insight that I'd share is there's a lot more emphasis this time around on the importance of the presenter exhibiting or being demure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, don't get me wrong, you still need to be incredibly respectful, exhibit a degree of humility. But the executive said, with regard to the speaker, this is your meeting, it's your platform, own it. That's what they're looking for. And I think the things that have caused this shift are twofold. One is just the degree to which many corporate cultures have changed from hierarchical top down to more flat organizations. And I'd say the second big influencer is the mix of generations in the workplace is very different today than what it was 2 decades ago, which has changed expectations.
Interesting. So in the last sort of 5 minutes, I'm just wondering whether you've got any personal insights that you'd like to share from the videos and the interviews that you did, and then just some final words of advice for us.
Absolutely. The number one that stands out to me was something she's founder and CEO of a nonprofit healthcare organization, and she's very, very seasoned. She's from New Jersey, and at the risk of stereotyping, she fits the persona. She's a no-nonsense straight shooter, got a lot of moxie. And she shared with me that she had recently been interviewed by a graduate student on a leadership development topic. And this grad student asked her, are you familiar with imposter syndrome? And the CEO said, yeah. And she said, well, help me to understand how you overcame it. And she said, and this woman, I think she's in her 60s. She said, I haven't. And frankly, I think if you do, you run the risk of being an asshole.
Wonderful. That says it as it is.
And that goes back to the authenticity too, right?
Mm.
Right? I mean, let's be real. No matter how experienced we are, what level we're at, we all experience a degree to that, or a degree of that. The key is learning how to work with it and overcome it. So that was a standout for me.
I love that, because that question comes up so much, absolutely so much. And parting advice then. And I know you've got a video to share with this one as well.
Yes. Yeah. So my parting advice is, first and foremost, I hope a takeaway for none of you is that, wow, there's a lot to this. Yes, there's a lot to it. It's like golf. I don't golf, but I know just from going to the driving range that you have to take it in small components in order to get really good. So of everything we talked about, if something resonated with you, focus on that one thing, getting better at that one thing. And I would say if you're striving and are a value creator, take time in investing in improving and honing these skill sets. It's one of the most significant things to do to increase your impact on an organization. And don't take it from me. I'd love to close by sharing a clip from one of the executives that we spoke to, who's an SVP of a big investment firm.
In the end, almost everything is communication. If communication is not clear between an organization and its people and its clients, its vendors, then simply put, you don't have very much. In a world of accelerating technology, AI, all of that, many types of skill sets are going to become commoditized. But what will not become commoditized is human communication and interaction. It is the way things are done. It's the one skill set that will never go away. If you can articulate yourself well, you can do almost anything.
Nice. Very nice. Lovely words to part on. It's been such a pleasure, Carrie, hearing these little snippets of insights that you've gleaned from your interviews. I'm really looking forward to the full report coming out next month and reading even more about it. I think for me, the biggest takeaway is this is a group of people trying to make the best decisions for their organization. It's not personal. We're just all in it together. So anything you can do to help make their lives easier is obviously going to be appreciated.
So well said, Sarah. And thank you so much. I might just have someone who can be co-host with me in the future.
Anytime. You're absolutely welcome. And I know that you'd like a little bit of time now, if you could, just to let us know what's happening next month.
Yeah. So I'd love to tee up our topic for next month. We are going to be covering the most common questions that we get in our various workshops and one-on-one coaching sessions. So before you part, if you have specific questions related to enhancing your presentation skills in a variety of formats, a variety of goals, please put them in chat, and we want to incorporate them into next month's live. Thank you so much to the audience and to you, Sarah. This has been a terrific, engaging conversation.
Pleasure.